After my close friend's husband passed away, she locked herself in her apartment, swallowed by grief, refusing to step outside no matter what. Taking advantage of my husband being out of town on a business trip, I bought some pastries and quietly headed to her place, intending to stay a few days to keep her company. Wanting to surprise her, I didn't call ahead. I just punched in passcode and opened the door. I never expected the scene before my eyes to freeze me to my core. Late that afternoon, after clocking out of the real estate firm on Lincoln Avenue, I stopped by a small bakery near the entrance of our condo complex. The Chicago rain had just stopped, leaving the asphalt slick and reflective, the headlights of passing cars dragging into long, cold streaks. I originally only planned to buy a slice of strawberry cheesecake for myself as a little reward, after a day of stressful meetings. But as the cashier boxed it up, for some reason, I thought of Chloe. She lived in the South Tower, the widow of my husband's late friend. Her husband, Tom, had died saving my husband, Mark, in a tragic car accident. Since that day, Mark always said he owed their family a debt. He would occasionally drop by to help Chloe fix the plumbing, move furniture, or mount shelves. Initially, my heart ached for her. A young woman, widowed early, living quietly. In that condo with her elderly father-in-law, it was a heartbreaking situation. Because of this, whenever I bought something delicious, I'd get an extra portion for her. I used to believe my kindness was the right thing to do. I believe my husband was an honorable, loyal man. I used to believe that if there was a moral boundary between a man and a woman, Mark would never cross it. Thinking about this, I asked the cashier to pack another slice of cake. Carrying the 2 boxes, smelling faintly of sweet cream, I drove back to our complex. We lived in the North Tower, and Chloe was in the South Tower, barely a 5-minute walk apart. But because it was damp and drizzling, I drove my car down into the underground parking garage beneath her building. I didn't text ahead, partly because I just wanted to drop off the cake on my way home, and partly because Chloe always texted me saying how lonely she was and that I could drop by anytime. I stepped out of the elevator. The hallway of the South Tower was eerily quiet. Warm yellow light spilled onto the polished tiles, carrying a faint scent of pine floor cleaner. Chloe's apartment was at the end of the hall. As I walked, I thought about what I'd cook for Mark tonight. Maybe a pot roast with mashed potatoes and roasted vegetables. He had been complaining of fatigue lately, and I wanted to take better care of him. Reaching her door, I knocked gently 3 times. Inside, there was a very faint sound, like a chair being hastily pushed back. I thought Chloe was resting and was about to call out, but the door suddenly swung open. The person standing behind the door wasn't Chloe. It was Mark, my husband. He was wearing the white button-down shirt I had ironed for him that morning, but the collar was crooked, and the top buttons were undone. There was a light sheen of sweat on his forehead. His eyes, initially annoyed, froze the second they landed on me. "Who is it?" His voice choked in his throat. He looked at the 2 cake boxes in my hands, then at my face. His expression shifted rapidly. "Maya, what are you doing here?" That question didn't sound like a husband accidentally running into his wife. It sounded like an interrogation, like I was the trespasser. I stood still for a few seconds, looking him up and down, and slightly furrowed my brows. "I came to bring Chloe some cake." "And you? What are you doing at her place at this hour?" Mark looked momentarily flustered. He ran a hand through his hair, glanced quickly back into the apartment, and said in a dry voice, "Oh, Chloe had a leak under her kitchen sink. She called me over to take a look. It was a quick fix. If it had been the old me, I would have believed him instantly, because helping Chloe was something that happened often, and he always told me about it, because I never thought the man who shared my bed could hide something so filthy behind such a decent facade." I nodded, reaching out to hand him the box. "Then take this in for her for me." But before my hand fully extended, the soft padding of slippers echoed from behind Mark. A sickeningly sweet female voice called out, "Mark, honey, who's at the door?" Chloe stepped out. She was wearing a loose beige silk nightgown, her hair tied loosely at the nape of her neck, her face pale as if she had just been startled. What made me freeze wasn't her panic, but where her hands were resting. Her lower belly was visibly swollen, a bump that definitely wasn't just weight gain. I stared at that bump, then up at Mark's face. The air in the hallway suddenly turned freezing cold. A thought as sharp as a knife slashed through my mind, but I forced my voice to remain perfectly level. "Chloe, you're pregnant." Chloe's face instantly drained of color. She shrank behind Mark's back, her eyes welling with tears as if I were bullying her. Mark pressed his lips together, saying nothing. That silence was what made my heart drop into my stomach. Right at that moment, the shuffling of slippers echoed from inside the apartment. Again. My mother-in-law, Helen, walked out of the kitchen, holding a steaming bowl of chicken broth. She spoke in an anxious, doting tone. "Mark, help Chloe. Sit down inside. Standing too long isn't good for my grandson." Saying that, she looked up and saw me. Her entire face went rigid. The broth sloshed over the rim of the bowl, a few drops hitting the hardwood floor. In that brief, agonizing second, any clumsy explanations became completely unnecessary. My grandson. Those two words felt like a physical slap to the face. I looked at my husband, looked at the woman cradling her belly behind him, and looked at my mother-in-law standing in Chloe's apartment, as if she owned the place. It turned out the last person to know the truth was me. Helen looked panicked for a split second, but it quickly morphed into cold defensiveness. She slammed the bowl onto the entryway table, marched to the door, and lifted her chin at me. "Since you've seen it, I won't hide it anymore. The baby in Chloe's belly is Mark's. This family cannot let our bloodline die out just because you are barren." I heard every word clearly, yet my ears were ringing. The years I had bitten my tongue bearing her passive-aggressive remarks, the bitter, questionable herbal supplements my mother-in-law forced me to drink, the times I bowed my head and swallowed my pride just to save face for my husband. All of it felt like it had been thrown into the mud. I let out a soft, breathy laugh, but my chest hurt so much I could barely breathe. Mark looked at me, his eyes a mix of evasion and frustration. "Maya, since things are already like this, just calm down and listen to me. I just wanted a child." I gripped the cake boxes so tightly the cardboard crumpled. So, my kindness had nurtured a betrayal. The man I loved enough to take the blame for our infertility was using that exact wound to stab me in the back. And in that moment, looking at the belly his whole family was treating like a priceless treasure, I suddenly remembered the medical report from years ago, still buried, deep in my nightstand drawer. The person who couldn't have children was never me. It was Mark. I stared at Mark for a long time, so long that he began to lose his patience. The man who had held me on rainy nights, who had whispered that as long as we had each other, we didn't need kids. He was now standing like a shield in front of another woman, protecting a pregnancy he believed was his own flesh and blood. And my mother-in-law stood there, her eyes sharp as daggers, acting as if I were the one at fault for not bowing down to this filthy arrangement. I asked very slowly, "How long have you known about this, Helen?" Helen crossed her arms over her chest, her voice icy. "Since she got pregnant. Let me be blunt. If you can't give birth, you need to know your place. Mark is an only child. This family needs an heir." Chloe's eyes brimmed with tears, her hands still cradling her bump, looking so fragile that if I hadn't seen the truth with my own eyes, I might have pitied her. "Maya, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to steal Mark from you. I just wanted a child so I'd have someone to lean on in the future. Since Tom passed, I've been so incredibly lonely." I burst out laughing. The sound echoed in the narrow, dry hallway, ringing with bitter irony. "You were lonely, so you slept with my husband. You wanted someone to lean on, so you let my in-laws hide it from me. Chloe, you make it sound so innocent." Mark frowned. "Maya, stop being so harsh. Chloe is a victim of circumstances. Too. Tom died saving me. I couldn't just abandon her." "So you didn't abandon her by getting her pregnant?" He choked on his words. Helen instantly cut in. "Stop making a scene. Men make mistakes, but women need to be forgiving. Besides, when the baby is born, he'll call you mom. Mark and I have already discussed it. We'll bring the baby home for you to raise. Everyone outside will think you gave birth to him. You get to be a mother. What are you losing?" I stared at her, waves of pure disgust crashing over me. They didn't just betray me. They wanted to use me as a shield to cover up their sins. They wanted me to raise the child my husband had with his mistress, continuing to wear the title of the official wife just to save their family's reputation. I set the 2 cake boxes down on the shoe cabinet near the door. The boxes were crushed, the strawberry cheesecake inside likely ruined just like the last shred of affection I held in my heart. Mark, is that what you think too? He avoided my eyes but still tried to take the moral high ground. I'm doing this for our family. Over the years, I've never blamed you for our lack of children. Now there's a solution. Stop being so selfish. My chest felt like it was being crushed in a vice. He had never blamed me. No, he never said it out loud because he knew damn well he was the one with the problem. Yet he let his mother torment me, let me drink those vile supplements, until I threw up, let our relatives look at me with pity. Because I loved him, because I was terrified of crushing his fragile male ego, I suffered in silence. I lifted my head, my voice turning to ice. Let's get a divorce. The 3 people in front of me froze. Chloe was the first to react. A flash of joy crossed her eyes before she quickly ducked her head to hide it. Helen sneered. A divorce? Good. A barren woman like you is just taking up space. Anyway, Mark furrowed his brows. Maya, stop using divorce to threaten me. I'm not threatening you. I'm calling my lawyer tomorrow morning. As for the assets, the condo is in both our names. The cars too. Since you committed adultery, you should figure out how you're going to leave. Helen's face instantly twisted in rage. Are you dreaming? My son bought the house. He bought the cars. You've lived a life of luxury on his dime for years. And now you want to clean him out? I looked at her, articulating every word clearly. You're mistaken, Helen. The mortgage on the condo is paid primarily from my salary. I made the down payments. On the cars. Your son makes less than half of what I do. Where do you get the confidence to say he supports me? Mark flushed bright red, a mix of humiliation and anger. Maya, do you really have to be this ruthless? Ruthless? I looked straight into his eyes. You brought another woman into your bed, got her pregnant, let your mother humiliate me, and then expected me to raise that child under my name. Between the 2 of us, who exactly is ruthless? The hallway was dead silent. Chloe bit her lip, clutching Mark's arm. Mark, if Maya doesn't accept this, then forget it. I don't want to make things hard for you. Her words were soft, but her grip on his arm was iron tight. Mark looked at me, his eyes growing cold. Fine. If you want a divorce, we'll get a divorce. Don't regret this later. I smiled, though tears were burning the corners of my eyes. I'm not the one who's going to regret this. With that, I turned around and walked straight toward the elevator. The metal doors closed, shutting out the 3 hypocritical faces. As the elevator descended, I finally realized my hands were shaking uncontrollably. But amidst the soul-crushing pain, a cold, crystal-clear thought emerged. That pregnancy absolutely could not be Mark's. And since they wanted to play out this happy family charade, I was going to grab a front row seat and watch the curtains tear themselves down. When I got back to our apartment, I stood outside the door for a long time, before finding the strength to turn the key. The lights were still on. On the dining table sat the pale blue table runner I had bought for our anniversary last year. Everything was so painfully familiar. Mark's slippers were neatly placed by the door. His favorite jacket hung over the back of a chair. The glass he used that morning was still sitting by the sink. Just a few hours ago, this was our home. Now, every single object seemed to be mocking my stupidity. I dropped my purse on the sofa and walked straight into the bedroom, throwing open the closet doors. The familiar scent of his fabric softener hit me, stinging my eyes. His dress shirts hung right next to my dresses, as if we were still a normal married couple. I reached out and yanked one of his shirts off the hanger, but the moment I held it, all my strength vanished. I sank to the floor, clutching the shirt, crying silently. I wasn't mourning the cheating husband. I was mourning the years I spent, believing he was a good man. I mourned the times he held me and said it was okay, if we didn't have kids, that he only needed me. I mourned how I had endured every criticism because of that one sentence. When his mother forced me to drink those bitter teas, I drank them. When his relatives asked when we'd have good News, I smiled and brushed it off. When people whispered that I wasn't a real woman, I stayed silent. I thought I was protecting our love. It turned out I was just turning myself into a joke for his entire family. I cried until there were no tears left. I stood up, wiped my face, and opened the bottom drawer of my nightstand. Inside was an old manila envelope, the edges yellowed. It was Mark's fertility clinic results from years ago. I had hidden it, like a wound I didn't want anyone to touch. Back then, the doctor was clear. Mark's chances of conceiving naturally were practically zero. I remembered standing in the hospital corridor, holding that paper, my whole body turning to ice. I thought telling him would destroy him, so I chose to take the blame. Looking back now, my pathetic loyalty was almost laughable. My phone buzzed. It was Mark calling. I stared at the screen for a few seconds before answering. Maya, have you calmed down? His tone still carried that arrogant assumption that he was the one granting forgiveness. What do you want? I've been thinking, don't be too aggressive about the assets. We were married. For years, I don't want you leaving empty-handed. I'll leave you a sum of money, out of respect for our time together. I let out a cold laugh. You'll leave it to me? Mark, did you forget who pays? For almost everything in this house? He went silent for a moment before lowering his voice. Don't let anger make you vindictive. You still have to live your life. A divorced woman who can't have kids. It's not going to be easy for you to find a decent man. That sentence was the final drop that made the cup overflow. I looked at the drop. Medical report in my hand, my knuckles turning white. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., at my lawyer's office. If you don't show up, I'll send all the evidence of your affair to your HR department and both our extended families. Are you blackmailing me? Mark hissed. I'm just taking back what's mine. I hung up. Immediately, Helen's number popped up. I ignored it. She sent a barrage of texts, each more venomous than the last, calling me ungrateful, saying a barren woman had no right to demand property, insisting no man would ever look at me. Again, I read every word. My heart didn't hurt like it had initially. There was only a bone-deep chill left. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my laptop, organizing bank statements, mortgage documents, car leases, and screenshots of Mark's frequent texts with Chloe that I pulled from his synced iPad. I even saved the recording of the call we just had. Each piece of evidence went into a separate folder. The more I worked, the clearer my mind became. I was no longer the wife crying in the dark. I was going to walk out of this marriage with my head held high. Near dawn, I messaged Laura, a corporate lawyer friend. She called me right back. Maya, are you absolutely sure you want to proceed with a divorce? I looked out the window. The Chicago sky was still gray, but a thin sliver of light was breaking behind the skyline. I'm sure. I won't be soft-hearted this time. At 9 a.m. the next day, I arrived at Laura's office 10 minutes early. I wore a tailored black blazer and pencil skirt, my hair pulled back into a sleek bun. Light makeup couldn't entirely hide the dark circles under my eyes. I had barely slept, but looking in the mirror, I told myself that no matter how shattered I felt inside, I would not let them see me weak today. Laura opened the conference room door and placed a prepared file in front of me. I reviewed everything you sent. If they don't want to go to court, they'd better sign the settlement. The evidence of infidelity is overwhelming, and the financial tracking proves you contributed significantly more to the marital of Lace assets. I nodded, my hand resting on the cold folder. I don't want to drag this out, but if they get greedy, I will take it all the way. Laura looked at me with a mix of sympathy and sternness. Don't cave. They were planning to pass off his illegitimate child as your own. That means they no longer viewed you as a human being. They saw you as a prop to hide their feminine scandal. Her words stung. She was right. The worst pain wasn't just Mark's betrayal. What chilled me to the bone was that his entire family sat down and strategized how to turn me into a human shield. They wanted to use my kindness, my legal status, and my silence to protect their reputation. 10 minutes later, the conference room door opened. Mark walked in first, followed by Helen and Chloe. Chloe was wearing a loose maternity dress, her hand resting protectively on her stomach, looking like a fragile victim. The moment Helen saw me, she gritted her teeth. Mark stopped in his tracks when he saw the Lawyer sitting next to me. You really brought a lawyer? I looked at him calmly. Did you think I was joking? Helen slammed her purse on the table. Don't think hiring a lawyer scares us. You lived in luxury with my son for years, failed to give him a child, and now you want to split his property? Do you have no shame? Before Laura could speak, I looked right at her. The person who should feel shame is the mother who brings her son's pregnant mistress to discuss his official divorce settlement. Chloe's face went white. She bit her lip, tears immediately springing to her eyes. Maya, I know you hate me, but please don't talk about Mark like that. We came together under very difficult circumstances. I didn't want to hurt you. I smirked. Didn't want to hurt me, yet got pregnant by my husband. Save the wand. Acting, Chloe. There's no audience here to applaud you. Mark frowned, stepping in front of Chloe. Maya, you're being incredibly bitter. Chloe is pregnant, don't agitate her. Seeing him protect her filled me with a bizarre sense of calm. Years ago, when Helen pointed her finger at my face and cursed me for being barren, he stood right there. Not once did he step in front of me like that. It turned out men knew how to protect women just fine. It just depended on whether the woman was someone they actually wanted to protect. Laura slid the divorce agreement toward Mark. Mark, this is the asset division agreement. The condo and the vehicles will go to Maya. The joint savings will be split according to actual contribution ratios. If you do not agree, we will file for litigation and submit all evidence of infidelity and the conspiracy to conceal a child outside of wedlock. Mark picked up the document. After reading just a few lines, his face darkened. She gets the condo? She gets the cars? Then what do I get? I answered flatly. You get Chloe. And the child you want so desperately. Helen shrieked. Absolutely not. Mark is used to living in that condo. And Chloe is about to give birth. She needs a stable place to live. Are you trying to throw my grandson out on the street? I tilted my head. Your grandson is your problem. What does he have to do with me? Helen was shaking with rage. She pointed a finger in my face. You are a vicious, toxic woman. You're just jealous because you're barren. When you're old and alone with no one to care for you, don't come crawling back to our family. I stood up, pulled a bank statement from my folder, and slapped it onto the table. You said your son supported me. Take a good look. For the past 3 years, the mortgage, the HOA fees, the car insurance, the furniture, the vast majority of it came from my account. Ask your son what his monthly salary is and what his personal expenses look like. He knows. Mark flushed crimson with shame and fury. He snatched the paper, gripping it so hard it crumpled. Do you have to humiliate me in front of everyone? I looked at him, my voice very soft. You pushed me to this point, and you're worried about being humiliated? The room went dead quiet. Chloe tugged at Mark's sleeve, whispering loudly. Enough for me to hear. Mark, just sign it. We'll have our baby soon. We can start over. I don't need a big house. I just need you to love us. It sounded noble, but her eyes flicked greedily toward the settlement papers. I saw the calculation clear as day. She wanted him to sign quickly so he could marry her and give the baby legitimacy. And Mark, driven by his bruised ego, grabbed the pen. Fine, I'll sign. Don't regret this, Maya. He pressed the pen down so hard it nearly tore the paper. The moment the final signature was placed, I thought I would be crushed by pain. But strangely, I only felt profound relief. Like a noose that had been tightening around my neck for years had finally been cut. Helen was still cursing. Mark was glaring at me with resentment, and Chloe was still playing the fragile victim, holding her belly. But none of it had anything to do with me anymore. Leaving the law office, I went straight down to the parking garage. As the elevator doors closed, I looked at my reflection in the polished metal. My eyes were red, my lips were trembling slightly, but my posture was straight. I told myself this marriage was over, but their circus wasn't. Chloe's pregnancy would progress, and the truth would eventually surface. When that day came, I wanted to see how Mark would face the child he was currently treating like a royal. Prise. I returned to the condo in the late afternoon. The dying sunlight slanted through the balcony glass, casting pale gold streaks across the hardwood floor. This place used to be my sanctuary. Every corner had my touch. The curtains I picked out, the dishware I bought, Even the potted pothos by the window I copplas brought home because Mark complained the place lacked greenery. Now, the apartment felt foreign, like a stage after the play had ended, leaving only fake props sitting in the cold light. I changed my shoes, walked into the bedroom, pulled out a massive suitcase, and started packing Mark's things. Dress shirts, ties, watches, shaving gear, the books he bought but never finished. Everything was shoved into cardboard boxes. My hands shook at first, but with every item I tossed out, I felt calmer. Every piece of his clothing felt like a rotting memory being yanked out of my chest. When I opened the bottom drawer, I saw the velvet box that held our wedding rings. His ring was sitting inside. He had taken it off God knows when, and I hadn't even noticed. I picked up the box and let out a dry chuckle. Love doesn't always die in explosive arguments. Sometimes it dies in tiny details like this, and you just purposefully look the other way. The doorbell rang aggressively. I didn't need to check the camera to know who it was. When I opened the door, Helen barged in like she owned the place, Mark, right behind her looking grim. "What are you doing with my son's things?" I pointed at the taped-up boxes. "Packing for him. You have until tonight to get it all out." Mark looked around the emptying room, his eyes wavering. Maybe it was only in that moment that he truly realized I wasn't bluffing. This marriage was dead, and he no longer had the right to walk into my life. "Maya, do you really have to take it to this extreme?" I looked at him with a calmness that surprised even me. "Didn't you sign the papers? Stop talking to me like we're still married." Helen sneered. "Don't think keeping the condo makes you a winner. A woman with no kids living in a big house is just going to cry herself to sleep. You'll see. People with grandchildren like me are the real winners." I smiled at her. "Then hold on tight to your victory, Helen. Let's just hope it's an actual victory." She froze, frowning. "What is that supposed to mean?" I didn't answer. Some truths ruin the fun if revealed too early. Mark stared at me, as if trying to find some trace of emotion in my eyes, but found only an icy void, no lingering attachment. He bent down to pick up a box, his voice hardening. "Mom, let's go. Don't waste your breath." Before stepping out, he looked back. "You'll regret this. Chloe is kind, and she's giving me a child. You'll understand eventually. Women fighting for assets will never equal a woman with a complete family." I shut the door right on his final sentence. The footsteps faded down the hall. The condo fell quiet again. I leaned against the door, exhaling a long breath. A complete family? Built on infidelity, lies, and a highly questionable pregnancy? How long could that possibly last? 2 days later, I took a few bags of old clothes down to the lobby to donate to a local charity drive. Walking out of the South Tower elevator, I happened to glance toward the courtyard garden. I spotted Chloe. She wasn't alone. Standing. Next to her was Mr. Foster, her former father-in-law, a man in his 70s, slightly hunched, with thinning white hair. What made me stop dead in my tracks was the way Chloe was clinging to his arm. She was leaning her head on his shoulder, her expression flirtatious and needy, nothing like a daughter-in-law caring for her late husband's father. Mr. Foster placed his hand over her pregnant belly, his gaze bizarrely affectionate. Chloe giggled, a soft, intimate laugh, then quickly glanced around as if terrified of being caught. I hid behind a large potted palm, my blood running cold. The fragmented suspicions in my head suddenly locked together into a horrifyingly clear picture. Mark was infertile. The baby obviously wasn't his. But if the man standing next to her was Mr. Foster, if that look wasn't paternal, if her panic every time DNA tests were mentioned wasn't just paranoia, then this secret was infinitely more grotesque than I had imagined. I quietly pulled out my phone to snap a picture, but then lowered it. It wasn't the right time. A blurry photo now would just give them a chance to deny it. I needed the truth to grow on its own, just like the belly they were so carefully tending. When the child was born, when its features became clear, when an entire neighborhood started whispering, that's when the show would hit its climax. I turned and walked away, a cold smirk playing on my lips. Mark thought he had won because he was getting a son. He had no idea the prize he was so desperately waiting for would become the most humiliating slap in the face of his life. I left the courtyard, my steps feeling heavy, not because I still cared about Mark, but because the truth was so revolting, Chloe had stood in front of me, crying, claiming she just wanted a child to lean on after her husband died. She played the fragile victim flawlessly. Yet here, in a hidden corner of the complex, her true nature was exposed, so clearly no further explanation was needed. I got into my car and sat in silence for a long time before starting the engine. The fluorescent lights of the parking garage flickered coldly against the windshield. My face looked exhausted but incredibly awake. The marriage was over, but the filth it left behind was still lingering. My phone rang. It was my mom. Seeing the word mom on the screen, my throat tightened. For the past few days, I hadn't dared to tell her about the divorce. Since my dad cheated and left her for another woman years ago, Mom had raised me alone. She always warned me that a woman shouldn't fear marrying a poor man, but should fear marrying a man without a conscience. Yet, I had walked right into the same trap that broke her heart all those years ago. I answered, trying to sound normal. "Hi, Mom." Her gentle voice came through. "Maya, are you two coming over for dinner this weekend? I got some great wild-caught salmon. Mark loves it when I bake it." I gripped the steering wheel. Just a normal, everyday question, and I was on the verge of breaking down. "Mom, can I come over in a little bit? I need to tell you something." There was a brief silence on the line. She must have heard the crack in my Latin voice. "Okay, honey, come over. I'll be waiting." I drove out to her small house in Oak Park. She was already standing on the porch, her hair much grayer than I remembered. As soon as I got out of the car, she didn't ask anything. She just reached out and touched my cheek. Her hand was warm but trembling slightly. "You've lost weight." Just those 4 words shattered the tough shell I had been holding up for days. I walked inside, sat down on her old wooden dining chair, and told her everything. From bringing the cake to Chloe's apartment, finding Mark there, the present pregnancy, Helen's cruelty, the divorce settlement, right down to seeing Chloe, intimately clinging to Mr. Foster. I spoke slowly, trying not to cry. But the more I talked, the more my voice broke. Mom sat across from me, her hands clasped tightly, veins showing. When I told her that Mark was the one who was infertile all these years, and that I had taken the blame and the abuse for him, she burst into tears. "You foolish girl. Why did you suffer through that alone? Why didn't you tell me?" I looked down, tears dripping onto the back of my hands. "I didn't want you to worry, and I didn't want to hurt his pride. I thought if I just endured it, we could have a peaceful life." Mom stood up and pulled me into a tight embrace. The familiar scent of her lavender soap made me sob like a child. All the resentment, the humiliation, the lonely nights lying next to Mark finally, I had a place to let it all out. She stroked my hair, her voice thick with emotion but resolute. "Cry, honey. But when you're done crying, you have to live your life with your head held high. Do not look back." A man who lets his wife suffer humiliation for his own shortcomings and then betrays her? He is not worth a single regret. I nodded into her shoulder. That evening, Mom made me a bowl of chicken and wild rice soup. I ate it slowly, feeling the knot in my stomach loosen just a bit. Just then, my phone lit up. A text from an unknown number. "Maya, I know you're angry, but please stop making things hard for Mark. My baby. And I just want a peaceful home." I stared at the text, my lips curving into a cold smile. Chloe was still acting. She wanted me to walk away quietly so she could take everything without paying a price. I typed exactly 1 sentence in reply. "Hold on to that house tightly. Just make sure you aren't the one who brings it crashing down." Then I blocked the number. Mom looked at me with concern. "What are you going to do?" I put the phone down, my voice calm. "I'm not doing anything. I'm just waiting. Some secrets don't need to be exposed. They rot and collapse on their own." I stayed at Mom's place that night. For the first time in days, I didn't feel like the empty room was swallowing me whole. But before I fell asleep, the image of Chloe leaning on Mr. Foster flashed through my mind. I knew that pregnancy was going to become the fire that burned down everyone who had laughed at my bling. Pain. I left Mom's house early the next morning before the sun was fully up. She pressed a thermos of coffee and a couple of apples into my hands, repeatedly, telling me not to skip meals and to never suffer in silence again. I hugged her, tightly on the porch, my heart aching but warm. It turned out that after all the promises that made me believe in marriage, the only person truly standing in my corner was my mother. On the drive to the office, I called David, the regional director of my firm. A while back, he had offered me a position to lead the new branch in San Diego, but I had turned it down because I didn't want to be away from Mark. Looking back, I realized I had sacrificed so many opportunities for a man who didn't deserve it. David, is that offer for the West Coast still on the table? There was a brief pause on the other end, then he chuckled. Maya, I thought, you'd never leave Chicago because of your husband. I watched the morning traffic, my voice level. I'm getting a divorce. If the company still needs someone, I want the position. David didn't pry. He just lowered his voice professionally. I'm sorry to hear about your personal life, Maya, but honestly, your talent has belonged in this role for a long time. Give me a week to sort the paperwork. Start preparing your handover. Hanging up, I felt a physical weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in years, a decision I made didn't revolve around Mark. I didn't have to worry about whether he'd be upset or if his mother would disapprove. I was finally living for myself. During my lunch break, I met Mom at the Water Tower Place Mall to buy some new clothes for the move to California. Mom always said a woman going through a breakup needs to dress beautifully, not to prove anything to anyone else, but to remind herself that she is worthy of love. I was linking arms with Mom, walking through the bright concourse, trying on a cream-colored blazer, when I heard a familiar voice behind me. Maya, are you following me? I turned around. Mark stood a few feet away. Next to him was Chloe, holding her belly. Helen was trailing behind them, carrying several bags of newborn baby clothes, looking so smug you'd think she had conquered the world. Seeing me, Helen immediately sneered. Oh, look who it is. The barren ex-wife. Why buy nice clothes? No matter how you dress up, you still couldn't keep a man. My mom's face darkened instantly. She stepped in front of me, her voice not loud, but sharp as a razor. Watch your mouth. My daughter is divorcing your son because he's an adulterer, not because she couldn't keep him. When a man is rotten to the core, keeping him just dirties your hands. Helen's face flushed bright red. Who are you to butt into our family's business? Mom laughed coldly. I'm the mother of the woman your family abused for years. Today, I finally see that it wasn't my daughter who was unlucky. She's incredibly lucky to escape a family with absolutely no shame. People nearby began to turn their heads. Chloe quickly grabbed Mark's arm, tears already pooling in her eyes. Mark, please, let's go. I don't want Maya to think we're intentionally showing off our happiness to make her feel bad. Watching her fake saint routine almost made me laugh out loud. She said she didn't want to show off, yet her hands aggressively rubbed her pregnant belly, making sure I couldn't miss it. Mark went immediately into protective mode. Maya, I know it hurts you to see Chloe pregnant, but the past is the past. Stop living in jealousy, behaving like. This just proves my decision to divorce you was the right one. I looked at him, replying smoothly. Rest assured, I have never felt my decisions were more correct than I do right now. He paused. He probably wanted me to be furious, wanted me to be devastated. I wanted me to look at Chloe's bump and break down. But I refused to give him the Chloe's satisfaction of winning. I turned to the cashier and handed over my credit card. I'll take this blazer and the 2 suits I tried on earlier. Helen scoffed. Throwing money around, are we? A divorced woman who doesn't know how to save. When you're old with no husband and no kids, who's going to support you? I took my card back and smiled at her. At least I'm spending my own money. You should save yours carefully for your grandchild's formula. Raising a kid is expensive, especially when you can't be entirely sure who the baby really takes. After. The smile on Chloe's face froze. Her hand tightened on her stomach. Mark frowned. Deeply. What nonsense are you spewing now? I shrugged. Just wishing you a happy fatherhood. With that, I took my mom's arm and walked away. After a few steps, Mom whispered, What did you mean by that? I glanced at the store window reflection, seeing a panicked Chloe looking over. Her shoulder at me. My heart felt cold as ice. Nothing, Mom. I just saw someone hugging a live grenade, convinced it's a gold mine. That night, I began packing my luggage. The large suitcase lay open on the bees floor, new clothes neatly folded inside. I didn't know what San Diego held for me, But I knew it wouldn't have Chloe's apartment, Helen's contemptuous glares, or the man who used my love to mask his own betrayal. Before I went to sleep, I got a text from Mark. The more you pretend to be calm, the more I know you still love me. I looked at the text and found it genuinely hilarious. Some people will go their whole lives without understanding that a woman's silence isn't always her waiting for you. Sometimes, it's just the end. The day I left Chicago, it was drizzling. My gray suitcase sat by the door. The apartment was stripped of everything that truly belonged to me. Any trace of Mark had been scrubbed clean. Yet, strangely, as I locked the door for the last time, a tiny pang hit my chest. Not because I missed him, but because I grieved. For the woman I used to be. The woman who cooked in that kitchen waiting for her husband, who smiled when he praised her food, who thought endless compromises would buy her a peaceful home. That woman had died that afternoon, standing outside the mistress's door. I rolled my suitcase down the hall and unexpectedly ran into Mark and Chloe. Getting off the elevator, Chloe was wearing a pale pink maternity dress, one hand on her belly, the other linking Mark's arm. Seeing my suitcase, she immediately put on a sweet smile, though her eyes couldn't hide her triumph. "You're actually moving, Maya? I thought you were just saying that." I locked my door and replied coolly, "I don't need to report my whereabouts to you." Mark looked at my suitcase, his voice dropping. "You're really moving to California? Just because you're mad at me, you're abandoning everything you know?" I looked at him, finding him more pathetic than infuriating. "You overestimate yourself. I'm leaving for my career, for my future. You aren't important enough for me to run away from." His face stiffened. Chloe quickly tugged his arm, whispering softly, "Mark, if she wants to go, let her go. Maybe getting away from here will help her forget you." I side-eyed her. The fake pity in her voice made me nauseous. But I wasn't going to waste another breath on her today. I walked past them with my suitcase. Right at that moment, the door to Chloe's apartment cracked open. Mr. Foster stepped out, leaning on his cane. The way he looked at Chloe carried an awkward, undeniable tension. Chloe instantly dropped Mark's arm and called out, "Dad? Why? Are you out here? Go back inside and rest. I bought the soup you like." Mr. Foster stared at her belly, his eyes softening dramatically. "I just wanted to see if you were home yet." The words were normal, but the look in his eyes was absolutely not that of a father-in-law looking at his son's widow. Mark seemed to notice something too. He frowned, looking from Mr. Foster to Chloe. Chloe instantly forced a laugh and gripped her stomach, groaning. "Mark, I feel a little dizzy. I've been standing too long." Predictably, the moment she played the damsel in distress, Mark forgot his fleeting suspicion. He supported her weight, looking worried. "Let's go inside." "You're pregnant, don't overdo it." I stood by the elevator, watching the scene with icy detachment. People who want to be blind will always find an excuse to close their eyes, even when the truth is screaming in their faces. As the elevator doors opened, I stepped inside. Before the doors closed, I saw Mr. Foster still staring after Chloe, while Chloe kept her head down, avoiding my gaze entirely. In that split second, I knew she was terrified. Not terrified that I still loved Mark, but terrified that I've seen something I shouldn't have. Down in the lobby, I ran into Sarah, my neighbor. She looked at my luggage and sighed. "You're really leaving?" "I heard what happened. I'm so sorry, Maya. But, honestly, it's good you're getting out. The gossip in this building about their family has been nonstop." I smiled faintly. "I'm just transferring for work." Sarah lowered her voice. "I'll be honest with you. Lately, people are noticing Chloe and Mr. Foster are acting a little too close. At first, we thought it was just a daughter-in-law taking care of her father-in-law, but it looks really strange. I just hope Mark wakes up soon, or he's going to be the laughingstock of the whole complex." I zipped up my jacket, my tone neutral. Sometimes the people on the outside see things clearly, but the person on the inside is the last to know. Sarah looked like she wanted to ask more, but instead just patted my arm. "Take care of yourself out there. Don't let them ruin your faith in people." I nodded and got into my Uber. As the car pulled out of the complex, I looked back at the building one last time. The balcony of my old apartment disappeared, behind the rain-soaked trees. That place had trapped me in a beautiful but Deceitful illusion of marriage. I wasn't leaving because I lost. I was leaving because I refused to stand in their mud for another second. At O'Hare Airport, I received a text from Laura. The paperwork is finalized. The condo and cars are fully transferred to your name according to the settlement. Have a safe flight. I read the text and finally exhaled. At the exact same time, Mark sent me a photo of an ultrasound, accompanied by a text. This is my son. One day you'll realize what you threw away. I stared at the photo for a moment, then locked my screen. What he was bragging to about today would very likely become the most agonizing evidence of his humiliation tomorrow. The plane took off, the city shrinking beneath me. I leaned my head against the plane window and closed my eyes. Ahead of me was San Diego, a new job, a new life. Behind me, Mark and Chloe's theatrical performance was still running. They just didn't know the stage was already rotting from the inside. San Diego welcomed me with bright sunshine and the salty scent of the ocean. Breeze. On my first day at the new regional office, I told myself I wouldn't wear the face of a broken woman. I wore the cream blazer Mom helped me pick out, slipped into my heels, grabbed my project files, and walked into the boardroom, as if every wound on my back had been sealed shut. David introduced me to the team, announcing that I would be overseeing client development and managing the new coastal resort project. The eyes in the room held curiosity and a bit of skepticism, but I didn't flinch. I had survived years of my mother-in-law's contempt and my husband's betrayal without collapsing. A few whispers in an office weren't going to scare me. My first week flew by in a blur of work. I arrived early and returned to my rented apartment long after the city lights came on. There were nights I stood on my balcony, watching the traffic over the Coronado Bridge, feeling incredibly hollow. But that hollowness didn't terrify me anymore. It felt like a room that had finally been cleared of years of accumulated garbage. Empty, but clean. Painful, but light. On Friday night, as I was reviewing a contract, my phone buzzed. It was a screenshot from Sarah in Chicago. It was Chloe's latest social media post. In the photo, Chloe was wearing a white maternity wedding dress, her belly huge, standing next to Mark in a hastily decorated banquet hall. Helen stood beside them, smiling so widely the wrinkles around her eyes deepened. Chloe's caption read, "Finally, a real home. Thank you for giving me and our baby a family." I stared at the picture for a long time, then laughed. A family? The word sounded beautiful, but built on betrayal, it was nothing more than a fresh coat of paint over black mold. Sarah texted, "It was a total shotgun wedding. Everyone in the building is gossiping. The bride looks ready to pop, the groom is forcing a smile, and your ex-mother-in-law is parading around bragging about her grandson. It's exhausting." I typed back, "Let them enjoy it while it lasts." Sarah sent a sighing emoji, then added, "I'm just afraid of the fallout when things blow up." I've seen Mr. Foster going over to Chloe's place a lot more lately. I set the phone down and closed my eyes. So the charade was continuing, now decorated with wedding flowers and fake blessings. Mark had sent me an Ennio Peeply ultrasound to brag, and now rushed a wedding to prove he wasn't wrong. The higher he built his castle on the sand, the harder the crash would be. Right then, my office door opened. A man in a light blue button-down walked in, holding a file. It was Nathan, the VP of the West Coast branch, whom I had met at the Monday briefing. He had a calm demeanor and a sharp, concise way of speaking, yet he was surprisingly observant. "Still here, Maya?" I quickly locked my phone screen and stood up. I was just reviewing the budget, estimates for the board. I wanted to make sure there were no errors. He placed a hot latte on my desk. I was walking by and saw the light on. "Hard work is great, but don't use the office as a hiding place for too long." I froze. He spoke softly, but he hit the exact nerve I was trying to conceal. Seeing my hesitation, he smiled. "I'm not prying into your personal life. It's just that people who have been through something heavy tend to force themselves to stay busy so they don't have to think." I looked at the steaming coffee. My defenses dropping just a little. "Thank you, but I'm fine." He nodded. "Fine is good. And if you aren't completely fine yet, that's okay." 2. Nobody expects someone who just walked out of a hurricane to immediately plant flowers. After he left, I sat in silence for a long time. For the first time since my World collapsed. Someone didn't judge me, didn't pity me, and didn't use my past to force me into being weak. Outside the glass window, San Diego glowed, peacefully in the foreign night. I suddenly realized my life didn't end with Mark. There might be hard days ahead, but from this moment on, I was finally walking toward my own future. Back in Chicago, that shotgun wedding was just the opening drumroll for the plague. Massive storm quietly gathering. The following weeks, I buried myself in the new project. The work in San Diego was demanding, but that rhythm saved me. In the mornings, I visited the construction sites by the ocean, listening to the crashing waves and smelling the damp sand. In the afternoons, I sat in strategy meetings, adjusting every metric in our financial projections. At night, I'd go back to my apartment, cook a simple meal, and FaceTime my mom. The wound in my chest didn't vanish overnight, but it stopped bleeding. I learned to stop checking my phone in dread of a text from Mark. I learned to smile when I saw young couples on the boardwalk without my heart clenching. But the peace didn't last long before Sarah called me one afternoon. As soon as I answered, her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. Maya, Chloe had the baby. My hand holding a pen over a document paused. Boy or girl? A boy. Helen is over the moon. She's posting photos all over the buildings. Next door page bragging about her grandson. But Maya, I gotta tell you, the baby looks weird. I stayed quiet. Sarah, afraid someone might overhear, spoke even softer. I know, newborns are potato-faced, but the bridge of the nose, the mouth, those tiny, close-set eyes, I swear to God, he looks exactly like Mr. Foster. The ladies in the building are already whispering. Some even said out loud that the kid doesn't have a single feature of Mark's. I put my pen down and looked out the window. The sky was clear, the sun casting a brilliant streak of light across the Pacific. I didn't feel the vindictive thrill I thought I would. I just felt a profound, dark chill. An innocent child was born, only to be used by adults as a tool for lies, a bargaining chip for status, and a trophy for a deeply rotten family. How is Mark reacting? He's acting thrilled. Carrying the baby around to show off, posting in the group chat that he finally knows what it's like to be a father. It's funny, but mostly just pathetic. I replied softly, let him be happy for a little longer. Not long after I hung up, a text from an unknown number popped up. I didn't need to guess. It was Mark. He sent a photo of a red-faced newborn wrapped in a blue blanket with the text. Look, my son, if you had just known your place, he'd be calling you mom right now. I looked at the wrinkled face in the photo. My eyes zeroed in on the corners of the mouth and the nose. Sarah was right. He didn't look like Mark, not even a little bit. A moment later, I texted back, are you sure he's yours? The second the text delivered, my phone rang. Mark was screaming on the other end, his voice dripping with venom. Maya, what the hell is wrong with you? Don't project your bitter jealousy onto an innocent baby. I kept my voice dead level. I was just asking a question. Why the extreme? Reaction? You couldn't get pregnant, so you want to curse my happiness, right? Let me tell you something, I have a son now. And you? You can run to California, make all the money in the world, but you're still just a barren woman. You have nothing. If it had been the old me, those words would have suffocated me. But right now, I only felt pity. Pity for a man desperately clutching a fabricated reality, using it to attack the woman who used to protect his fragile ego. Mark, I said quietly, I used to think you were pathetic because you didn't know the truth. Now I realize you're pathetic because you're terrified of finding it out. He went dead silent, then hissed, you're insane. Believe what you want. I hung up. That evening, Nathan invited me to dinner to celebrate our project passing the blank 2clays.com. First phase of board approval. The restaurant was right on Mission Bay, the lights reflecting off the water. He didn't ask about my personal life. He just told a few funny stories about his early days in the industry. For the first time in a very long time, I genuinely laughed. As the dinner wound down, he looked at me, his voice deep and warm. Maya, I don't know how heavy your past is, but I see you trying incredibly hard to live. A good, honest life. That's worth so much more than pretending you've never been hurt. I looked at him, and my guarded heart softened just a bit. Some people crash into your life like a hurricane, and others just quietly leave a lantern on the path, not forcing you to walk, just letting you know the road is still there. When I got home, there was another text from Sarah. Maya, today I saw Mark standing outside the DNA clinic down the street for a long time. He looked like he wanted to go in, but Chloe called him, and he turned around and went home. I stared at the message, a strong intuition rising within me. Once a seed of doubt is planted, no amount of tears can drown it. Chloe could act once, twice, but that child was going to grow every single day. His face would become an every single day. Irrefutable confession that no one could tear up. From that call onward, I knew Mark was cracking. A man who had been so arrogant, he shoved his son in his ex-wife's face, was now standing outside a clinic, paralyzed by fear. The irony was suffocating. He had coldly forced me to accept a bastard child, let his mother verbally abuse me for being infertile. But when the truth threatened to crash onto his own head, he was too scared to even open the clinic door. But I was no longer waiting around for his epiphany. My days in San Diego grew brighter. The Coastal Project entered a critical phase. I attended endless meetings with Nathan. He wasn't aggressive, didn't use cheap pickup lines, but he was always exactly where I needed him to be. When I was exhausted, he'd place a hot tea on my desk. When I was stressed during tough negotiations with contractors, he just whispered, "Hold your ground. I've got your back." That simple sentence left me speechless for a long time. In my marriage, I had always stood in front of Mark, taking the hits to protect his pride. Now, for the first time, a man was offering to stand behind me. Not to cover up mistakes, but to let me walk forward with confidence. That afternoon, after successfully signing the biggest contract of the quarter, the whole room applauded. David called to congratulate me, saying bringing me to the West Coast was the best decision he made all year. I stood by the glass window looking at the ocean, my eyes stinging. It turned out that when you walk away from a toxic person, all you lose is dead weight. What you gain back is and yourself. That night, Nathan drove me home. When the car stopped outside my building, he didn't leave immediately. He turned to me and asked, "Are you free this weekend? I'd like to take you to dinner, not for work." I looked at him, my heart skipping a beat. "Nathan, I'm divorced. And my baggage isn't light." He smiled, looking me straight in the eye. "I know you walked a tough road, but I'm not trying to date your past. I want to know who you are right now." I didn't answer right away. The night breeze slipped through the cracked window, carrying the faint scent of salt water. Part of me was still terrified. Terrified of trusting again and being wrong. Terrified of opening a door that had just been repaired. But another part of me knew that just because I met a monster didn't mean I had to turn my back on the light forever. "Okay, this weekend." Nathan smiled, a soft, genuine smile that warmed me to my core. But just as peace settled in, Chicago sent one last freezing gale. Sarah called me on Sunday morning, her voice frantic. "Maya," they threw a 1-month celebration party for the baby. Invited the whole complex down to the banquet hall. I set down my coffee mug, and Helen was carrying the baby to every table to show off, but everyone who looked at him thought he was a spitting image of Mr. Foster. One older lady actually blurted out, "Why does your grandson look exactly like the other grandpa?" Helen heard it and turned white as a sheet. How did Mark react? He forced a laugh, but his hands were shaking. And Chloe? She just clutched the baby to her chest and wouldn't let anyone hold him for too long. Mr. Foster was there too. He was looking at the baby with tears in his eyes. Anyone with half a brain could see something was deeply wrong. I stayed quiet. The final thread was stretching to its absolute limit. Just a little more pressure, and it would snap. That night, Mark called me. His voice had lost all its arrogance. It was raw and raspy. "Maya, tell me the truth. Did you see something between Chloe and Mr. Foster back then?" I closed my eyes. He finally asked, "You should be asking your wife, not me." "You knew, didn't you? You've known this whole time." His voice trembled. Through the phone, I heard the sound of something shattering against a wall, followed by Chloe's panicked shrieks. "Mark, don't listen to her. She's just trying to destroy our family." Mark roared, "Shut up. I'm asking you one question. Why does everyone say my son looks exactly like your ex-father-in-law?" Why does he look at the baby like that? The background erupted into chaos. Chloe sobbing, Helen yelling at her son to calm down, the baby screaming. I held the phone, feeling remarkably detached. The final storm wasn't far away anymore. It had kicked down their front door, and this time, no one could pretend they didn't hear it. I didn't interrupt, nor did I hang up. I just stood by the window, listening to their family shatter into pieces. They used to stand in a united front against me, using that pregnancy as a weapon to humiliate me. Now, that same pregnancy was the blade gutting their own pride. Chloe wailed, "Mark, if you don't believe me, what's the point of living? I just gave birth to your child and you're listening to outsiders? Then explain it," Mark screamed. "Why does he look like him?" Helen jumped in, her voice shaking with panic. "Mark, calm down. All babies look like mashed potatoes when they're born. People just look like whoever you think of. Don't listen to the gossip." I let out a soft laugh. Helen had been the loudest, the proudest, waving that pregnancy around like a trophy. Now, she was the one most terrified of the Braze's truth. Because the moment that child wasn't her grandson, all the venom she spat at me would bounce back and hit her right in the face. Suddenly, Mark yelled my name into the receiver. "Maya, are you still there? I've heard enough. Tell me," he pleaded. "Back then, when you said I couldn't have kids." "Do you? I have the original medical records. Do you have proof?" I looked down at the blueprints on my desk, my voice turning to ice. "Whether you can or can't. You can go to a clinic and find out yourself. Don't come, looking to me for answers to your own cowardice." He fell silent. That sentence hit the exact wound he had been desperately covering up. He asked, his voice barely a whisper. If the baby isn't mine, will you be happy?" I closed my eyes. Happy? I used to think the day he was exposed, I'd be ecstatic. But now that it was happening, I just found it incredibly sad and cruel. An innocent child dragged into an adult circus. A man who destroyed his own marriage chasing the illusion of a bloodline. A mother-in-law who weaponized genetics against her daughter-in-law, only to end up nursing a bastard of her own making. "I'm not happy," I said. "I just think you're reaping exactly what you sowed." I hung up. That night, Sarah sent a short video clip to the neighborhood group chat. I hesitated, then opened it. It was from the 1-month party. Mr. Foster was standing next to the baby stroller, his hand trembling as he reached out to touch the baby's blanket. Chloe rushed over to pull his hand away, but the eye contact they shared lasted a second too long, and it was entirely too intimate. A neighbor had accidentally caught it on video and posted it with a joking caption, "Can't tell if that's the grandpa or the dad. He loves him so much." One sentence, and the comments exploded. People confirmed the baby looked like Mr. Foster. People brought up the rushed wedding. People whispered about how twisted the whole situation was. Sarah texted me that Helen was furiously demanding people delete the video, but it had already been saved and shared. The more she tried to erase it, the louder the gossip got. I set the phone down. The play had finally spilled out of their apartment and into the public square. The reputation Helen had guarded so viciously was now being dragged through the mud by her own greed. 2 days later, Mark sent me a picture of the entrance to a DNA testing facility. The text read, "I'm getting tested." I didn't reply. He needed to walk that path alone. Just like years ago, when I stood outside the fertility clinic alone, holding his test results, my legs entirely numb, with absolutely no one beside me. That afternoon, Nathan took me to sign a contract with a vendor. On the drive back, he noticed I was distracted. He didn't pry, just parked the car by the Pursuit beach. We got out. The wind whipped my hair around. He handed me a bottle of water, his voice deep. "Some things take a long time to end. Not because you still want them, but because the truth takes time to stand on its own 2 feet. I looked at him, a lump forming in my throat. I thought just living well was enough, but having the past continuously claw at my ankles was exhausting. "So don't carry it alone," he said softly, placing a firm, reassuring hand on my shoulder. I didn't pull away. For the first time in a very long time, I allowed to myself to lean on someone else's kindness without feeling like I was betraying myself. That night, Sarah called. Her voice was buzzing with adrenaline. "Maya, it's Over. Mark got the results back. He walked into the lobby looking like a ghost. As soon as he got to his apartment, all hell broke loose. Helen was screaming, crying, calling Chloe a scam artist. It didn't go the way they wanted. I gripped my phone tightly. The dark waves of the Pacific crashed against the shoreline like a steady drumbeat. The hurricane had finally made landfall. And I knew, after tonight, Mark would have no more lies left to hide behind. Before I even left for the office the next morning, Sarah sent a barrage of texts. The first one made me freeze. The DNA test confirmed Mark is not the father. I read the words, but I didn't feel the triumph I once imagined. The truth had dropped like a guillotine, violently severing a family already rotting from the fibles, severing a family already rotting from the probable. Inside, Sarah explained that the whole floor heard the screaming match. Mark had stood in the living room holding the DNA results and a brand new fertility clinic report proving his sterility. He was pale as a sheet. Helen was sitting on the floor, weeping and cursing Chloe. Chloe was still clutching the baby, desperately claiming the clinic forged the papers, that someone was framing her, that someone was trying to destroy their happiness. But tears couldn't save her anymore. Mark had roared, "How long were you going to play me? I can't have kids, and you knew that, didn't you?" "I didn't know," Chloe sobbed. "Mark, I swear I just loved you." Helen snatched the papers from her son, reading them over and over, shaking violently. "Then whose bastard is this?" At that exact moment, Sarah typed, Mr. Foster had walked out of his apartment across the hall. Seeing the baby crying until his face turned purple, he couldn't hold back anymore. He rushed in and grabbed the child. Just that one protective instinct completely shattered Chloe's lies. Mark looked at Mr. Foster's trembling hands holding the baby, then at Chloe's terrified face, and finally understood everything. He stopped screaming. He didn't smash anything. He just stood there like a hollow shell. In that moment, he finally tasted the absolute agony of betrayal, the exact agony he had forced me to swallow while feeling absolutely no remorse. My phone vibrated. Mark was calling. I was standing in my sunlit office in San Diego, the glare almost blinding. I stared at the caller ID, hesitated, and then answered. Maya. His voice was wrecked. Just one word and he sounded entirely unrecognizable from the arrogant man who had discarded me. "I know everything. Now." I said nothing. "I'm sorry. I was stupid. I wronged you. You took the humiliation for me for years, and I treated you like garbage. Maya, can you give me another chance? I don't care about kids anymore. I just need you." I looked down at the project file on my desk, calmly turning to a fresh page. "Mark, it's not that you don't care about having kids. It's just that I couldn't have the kid you thought was yours." He choked. "I am truly, deeply sorry. Sorry you lost me, or sorry you got scammed?" Dead silence on the line. That silence was the clearest answer. I smiled. Faintly, my heart stone cold. "When you stood outside Chloe's door and let your mother curse me for being barren, did you ever think about today? When you told me to raise another woman's child to save your pride, did you ever consider me a, quote, human being?" He broke down sobbing. The sound of his tears, the tears of a man who once tore me to pieces, didn't stir a single ounce of sympathy in me. "My mom wants to see you too," he begged. "She says she was wrong. She wants to apologize." "I don't need it. A late apology doesn't erase years of abuse." Just then, my office door opened. Nathan walked in, pausing when he saw my expression. He didn't ask questions. He just stood quietly by my desk. Mark must have heard the door. "Who's there? Who are you with?" he demanded, his tone instantly spiking with possessiveness. I looked at Nathan, then spoke clearly into the phone. "Someone who has nothing to do with you, but who knows how to respect me better than you ever did." Mark's voice cracked. "You have someone else?" "We are divorced, Mark. Who I move on with is none of your business." He gasped, as if the reality that I was truly gone was finally suffocating him. But I was done listening. "Mark, don't ever call me again. Fix your own life. I'm busy living mine." I hung up and powered off the phone. The room went quiet. Nathan placed a warm cup of water on my desk, his voice a low rumble. "You okay?" I looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't try to put up a brave front. "I'm not perfectly okay right now. But I will be. He nodded. That's enough. By that afternoon, the scandal of Mark's family had spread through their entire complex in Chicago. Chloe was shipped back to her rural hometown by her former populace in-laws. Mr. Foster was sent away by his furious relatives to avoid the disgrace. Helen locked herself indoors, too ashamed to show her face, and Mark took an extended leave of absence from work, unable to handle the whispers. The family that once stood so proudly, weaponizing their cruelty against me, had destroyed themselves without me lifting a finger. I stood by the window watching the sun set over the Pacific, feeling incredibly light. Not because they were ruined, but because I finally understood karma. Might be delayed, but it always arrives in a way the people who planted the writings as seeds can never escape. After that phone call, I thought the past would still try to drag me back a few more times. But strangely, everything went completely quiet. No more bragging, texts, no midnight calls, no more venom from Helen. Sarah occasionally updated. Me, the Chicago apartment stayed locked. Helen became a recluse, and Mark was playing a ghost. They fell apart, and I didn't need to watch. People who fall into an abyss usually dig at themselves with their own greed, lies, and cruelty. A year later, I was officially promoted to Director of Coastal Development. On the day of my appointment ceremony, Mom flew out to San Diego. She sat in the front row, wiping her eyes as I walked on stage to accept my flowers. Afterward, she held my hands tightly. My girl finally stood back up. I hugged her, tears slipping down my face. I didn't stand up alone, Mom. You were always right behind me. Nathan was there too. After the guests left, he took me for a walk along the beach. The breeze was light, the waves rhythmic, like the breathing of a brand new life. He stopped, reached into his pocket, and pulled out a small velvet box. My heart raced. Maya, I can't promise to make you forget your past, because what you survived is part of the incredible woman you are today. But I promise, if you want to, keep walking forward. I will walk beside you with nothing but respect and honesty. I looked at the ring, then into his steady, peaceful eyes. I once thought that, after my divorce, I'd never have the courage to love again. But the human heart is resilient. It can be bruised and cracked, but when met with genuine kindness, it learns how to beat again. I nodded. I don't need a man who promises me the world. I just need a man who doesn't turn me into a joke in my own love story. Nathan slid the ring onto my finger. Under the California sunset, I felt lighter than I had in years, like I had finally dropped the heaviest luggage of my life. Our wedding was intimate and warm, just Mom, close friends, the blue ocean, and genuine laughter. No flexing, no trying to prove anything to anyone, just two people who had seen the dark, choosing to hold hands in the light. A few months later, on a perfectly normal morning, I stood in my bathroom, staring at a pregnancy test. 2 pink lines. I didn't cry hysterically. I just placed my hand over my stomach, feeling a profound, quiet joy seep into my soul. When I told Nathan, he hugged me so tightly. He didn't shout or brag, he just kissed my forehead. Thank you for letting me be a part of this family. I leaned against his chest, and the tears finally fell. Not tears of pain, but the tears of a woman who had walked through an endless night to finally touch her own sunrise. I used to be cursed as incomplete. I was pressured to raise a child born of betrayal. I was backstabbed by the person I loved most. But in the end, I learned that a woman's completeness has nothing to do with having a husband or a biological child. It has everything to do with whether she still knows how to love and respect herself. Lesson 1. In marriage, sacrifice only matters when it's given to the right person. If you sacrifice for an ingrate, it just becomes a weapon used against you. Lesson 2. Never let anyone use your ability to have children to measure your worth. Motherhood is a beautiful thing, but it is not the sole metric of a woman's dignity. Lesson 3. The truth can be hidden for a season, but it cannot be buried forever. Lesson 4. When you are betrayed to your core, walking away isn't losing. It is the ultimate act of saving your own life. And the final lesson, a good person will never force you to swallow your pride, to save their reputation. A man who truly loves you will help you heal your wounds, not use them as a blade to cut you down.